Welcome to Page 3 Killers, Headline Minis, where we talk about the headlines that stole the front page of the news. Welcome, guys, to Page 3 Killers, Headline Minis. So this is episode 1, or mini-sode 1. And our headline case is the bombing of the USS Cole. So I have John here specifically because this is a Navy-related case, and he's going to give us the Navy side of this story. So I'm just going to dive right into this. Haha, get it? Dive, guys, because it's the ocean, it's the Navy. I know.
That's not funny.
Not very funny. Now, the USS Cole is a guided missile destroyer in the United States Navy. On October 12th, 2000, the USS Cole is bombed by a suicide attack by Al-Qaeda members while she is in port fueling in the Yemen Aden Harbor.
So for anyone who doesn't know where Yemen is, the small country on the Arabian Peninsula, kind of southeast. Yeah, southeast. And something like 90% of the world's oil passes by within like 5 miles of its coast.
Wow.
Some ridiculous, I'm probably making that number up, but some ridiculous amount of the world's oil passes right past the coast of Yemen every single day.
That's insane. Now, this attack causes the death of 17 U.S. Navy sailors, injures 37, and is listed as the deadliest attack against a U.S. naval vessel since the USS Stark incident in 1987.
I'm actually unfamiliar with that. All right, well, moving on.
So we're going to talk about the attack. Now, this happens on a clear morning on Tuesday, October 12th.
Bad stuff always happens to America on Tuesday mornings. No, then 9/11.
Right, 9/11, sorry. And this takes place before 9/11. So, now, at this time, the USS Cole is under the command of Kirk Leopold, and she is docked in for a routine fuel stop. So just for a reference, guys, ships are female. They call them she.
Yeah, I don't know of any exceptions to that.
Yeah, which is, I find really funny because they had this whole, like back in like the 1800s, they didn't like women on the ship because it was bad luck to have women on board.
Because you were married to the ship.
Exactly.
That's who you took care of. You always took care of the ship.
So I find it funny that the ship is a woman. Okay.
Well, that's the whole point. There's only one woman allowed on the ship. And that's the ship.
Yeah. The USS Cole completed its mooring at 9:30 and began to refuel at 10:30. At 11:18 local time, a fiberglass boat carrying C4 explosives and 2 suicide bombers approaches the port side of the destroyer and explodes. The blast from the C4 explosives creates a 40 by 60 foot gash in the side of the... You guys can see that. I will have it up on the screen in our tile for today's episode. They believe that there was around 400 to 700 pounds of explosives used to do this damage. And when the fiberglass boat strikes the USS Cole, much of the blast enters at the mechanical space right below the ship's galley, killing and injuring crew members who were, at the time, just lining up for lunch. The sailors injured in the explosion were taken to United States Army Medical Center in Ramstein, Germany, before being sent back to the United States. The uninjured crew fought flooding in those engineering spaces and had the damage under control after around 3 days. Divers inspecting the hull determined that the keel was not damaged. Babe, can you give me an explanation of what the keel is? Is that the bottom of the ship?
The keel is the beam running down the center of the bottom of the ship.
Okay, so that's the keel. So they determined that was not damaged, and that the ship was basically salvageable. Now, the first naval ship on scene after the explosion was the HMS Marlborough, under the command of Captain Anthony Rick. That is a Type 23 frigate of the Royal Navy. So now the HMS Marlborough was on passage to the UK after a 6-month deployment in the Persian Gulf. It was very lucky for the injured aboard the USS Cole that the Marlborough had full medical and damage control teams on board. And when she offered the assistance, it was immediately accepted, and they diverted the course to meet up with the ship.
Mm-hmm. So frigates are small boys. They're pretty tiny.
So the investigation was headed by the FBI and NCIS. And yes, guys, that is a real thing, not just a television show. Let me be clear, though. The television show is not real. But there are real NCIS agents. And they get sent to Yemen to investigate the bombing. And they found that Yemen at the time, when they get there, is very hostile. You know, the environment is just not great. When they get off at the airport, they are greeted by the Yemeni special forces. And they said in several articles that the soldiers were pointing AK-47s at them when they got off the plane.
As one would expect.
Yes. In addition to that, speakers in the Yemeni parliament were calling for a jihad against America, which was broadcasted on television local every night. They also delayed turning over the CCTV video from the harborside security cameras from that crucial moment of the explosion. And when they did get hand the tapes over, that was the portion of the tape that somehow mysteriously was deleted. It didn't film.
I don't know why that would be mysterious.
So, yeah, it's not mysterious at all. They didn't want to turn it over, so they never did. Now, the agents that were there said that the tension was so high that they decided it best to sleep in their clothes and have their service weapons available at all times. And at one point, their hotel became surrounded by hostile individuals dressed in traditional clothing, all of them carrying guns. So they ended up abandoning their hotel and staying on a U.S. Navy vessel out in the bay instead of being in the city. Like, that's just crazy. I mean, it is a war zone, so not unexpected, I would say.
In Yemen, it's considered, like, if you think Texas has got a lot of guns, like, you're expected to have a gun on you at all times in Yemen as a man. Like, you just carry around an AK like, a fully automatic AK.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, select fire. I'm talking a real AK-47, not some Americanized, like, semi-automatic, Century Arms AK.
And now people get up in arms about the gun laws here in America, and it's like the Wild West over there.
Except for the Wild West wasn't particularly wild.
Yeah, it was actually quite civilized, mostly by prostitutes.
Yes.
Yes, they civilized the men.
We're not talking about the Wild West. Get going. It's called a mini.
Yes. So, Al-Qaeda, they publicly say that they did it. That they're responsible. They take public responsibility for the attack on the USS Cole. But did you know that prior to that, there was an attempt on another U.S. destroyer called the USS the Sullivans that was a failed attempt. It didn't actually happen. And that was on January 3rd of 2000 in the same port. And it was nicknamed the 2000 Millennium Attack Plot. Their plan was pretty much the same thing, was to load a boat full of explosives and detonate it near the Sullivans. However, they had a slight miscalculation on how much weight their boat could handle, and they put too much in it and it sank. So they abandoned that attack attempt. After the investigation into the attack on the USS Cole, they found that prior to the attack in October, there was an Al-Qaeda summit that was held in Kuala Lumpur on January 5th to the 8th, where they openly talked about this plot, the failed plot, and the 9/11 hijackings. And to be honest, the way that they get this information is less than scrupulous, or is less than unscrupulous, right?
No. Being scrupulous means to have scruples. No.
What are scruples, anyway?
That means you're acting properly.
Yes. So, it was
I got that.
unscrupulous.
It was scrupulous. Because
Scrupulous.
if you have scruples, then that means that's the opposite
Yes.
of scrupulous.
So, basically, they get this information through torture and threats, basically. Now, after the bombing, the Yemeni Prime Minister reports that one of the major masterminds of the 9/11 attack was a key planner in the bombing of the USS Cole. And that was Midir. And Midir would later, after this summit, return to the United States and participate in the 9/11 hijacking of Flight 77, which flies into hits the Pentagon and kills 184 people. Now, this is just, a series of tragedies that happen. So we have, the loss of 17 good sailors, men who, were missed by many family members. But it does have a silver lining, as terrible as it is. In December of 2000, the USS Cole is hauled back to Mississippi, where she is rebuilt and then sent back out. So she is still, I would believe she is still patrolling the seas.
I mean, this is 21 years ago. She
might have been retired by now. But, yeah, so she was able to go back out and continue protecting the open seas. The United States Navy reconsidered its rules of engagement in response to attacks.
This is where I'm supposed to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so basically what happened with these guys is they approached the ship, and they kept on giving them warnings, and sailors that were basically in charge of security just thought that they didn't understand what they were saying, so they let them approach in order to try and communicate with them better. And that was a bad idea. So afterwards, the protocols became essentially a hard barrier, or a hard perimeter. So there's basically a standing order that anyone who crosses that perimeter is immediately engaged, and you don't go any further. Doesn't really matter. It's a shoot first, ask questions later now.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was pretty common to have, especially small watercraft. It's hard to even call that a ship, like inflatable rafts. It was pretty common to have them approach the ships and get pretty close. Not anymore. We will light you up with a 50 cal like that.
And how did this change?
There was a lot of damage control stuff that was also developed. Like you said, it took 3 days to secure a lot of the flooding. But people also just don't really understand how ships work most of the time. It took 3 days to secure the flooding, and the ship didn't sink. Think about that. Yeah. Right? 3 days with a 60-foot gash in the side of your your hull, and it didn't sink. So, but there were some improvements with that, some procedural stuff, and they like to talk about this in boot camp because virtually everyone that died was a junior sailor.
Yeah, so that means they were like
E4 and below. I think there was only one person, E5 and above, that was killed. So they like to scare the crap out of you and remind you that you are going to be the first ones to die if we're ever attacked. Because, especially with a destroyer, it is your job to get hit before the more important targets get hit.
Which is the aircraft carrier, right? Yes. Aircraft carriers, the bigger ships.
So if you're out in a carrier group, a destroyer's primary objective is essentially to intercept anything that's going to hit a carrier. Which
is why in the game Battleship, it only takes 2 pegs to sink.
3 pegs. The ship.
3 pegs to sink a destroyer versus...
Well, that's just the size of it. The destroyers are...
massively bigger.
No. Destroyers are small.
No, the aircraft carrier is
so you have
massively
aircraft
bigger.
Carriers, cruisers, then destroyers, and then frigates in terms of the size. And then once you get down to frigates, there's some other... there's hospital ships and stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not part of carrier groups. And, destroyers are... I think my buddy Joe was on a destroyer. They're a few hundred guys.
Yeah.
And, on the carrier, we had up to 6,500 people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
With a full flight crew.
That's insane. So not only do... so the Navy changes, its protocols and how it deals with all of, the threats of, threatening actions of terrorists and stuff like that. But in addition to that, on February 13th, 2020, which is this year, well, it was last year, the government of Sudan agreed to compensate the family of the sailors who died in the bombing, which I think is crazy.
Because they're the poorest country on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. True. The people that did carry out the assault on the USS Cole, they were from Sudan. They were Sudanese.
So make everybody else in Sudan pay for their...
Exactly. For their...
That makes a ton of sense.
Their idiocy? I don't know what word could be applied to this. Their...
Crimes?
Yes. Crime. Yeah, well, this is page 3 killers, so... But true, this is a page 1 killer, though. Because this was on... Probably on the front page news.
Oh, yeah, this would have been front page newspaper on every newspaper in America.
Yeah, because, this was prior to 9/11. This was the first attack on...
What was the first... It was the first... It was a big deal.
Yeah, because, like I said, we hadn't had an attack on a U.S. naval ship.
I think it was the deadliest attack since the Marines were attacked in, what was that? I don't think it was Saudi Arabia. I can't remember. Iraq, Iran, somewhere over the Middle East. There was the Marine base was attacked.
So that is it for our first mini-sode of page 3 killers. And that is everything on the bombing of the USS Cole. So we hope you guys enjoy your night or day or whatever time of day this is for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy it. And remember, as always, stay sexy and don't get murdered. Welcome to Page 3 Killers, Headline Minis, where we talk about the headlines that stole the front page of the news.